The 6-5 weekly show is back, and we are unencumbered by any Crowdstrike issues. We are live. Did not get blue screens when we went into our PCs this morning, but yeah, that is just one of the topics we're going to be talking about. But I gotta introduce Daniel. I mean, which bunker? So, are you in Hawaii hobnobbing with Michael Dell? And Mark Benioff, or are you on some Caribbean island hanging out with CEO of JP Morgan or something? Where are you?
Oh man, I wish I could tell everybody, but when you're flying at these altitudes, you got to make sure you protect your location. But I might be somewhere where the water's warm, where your soul feels free, where the sun shines on your face and turns you red like a tomato. I'm somewhere nice. I've been on a board off site, but I am getting a little bit of vacay in here. Been playing a little golf, getting a little water, and soaking in the sea. But Pat, I appreciate you pointing that out. It's been a nice week, and I can't believe it's already Friday. It's been a week since I left beautiful.
I know, it's great.
Beautiful sunny Texas.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really happy to see you actually take time off. I mean, I didn't take time off until, I don't know, 2 years ago. But it's nice to see that. And, we all have our different ways of working. We all have, for some people, it lowers their stress to come in and get a little work done. And even when I was in Europe for 2 weeks, I did email triage a couple hours a day, come in and get stuff done. But the one thing I didn't do was do any video calls. But Dan, we made it 224 episodes without getting canceled. I'm really excited about that. And we got some great topics for you. We're going to start
I'm
off
closer. I'm getting closer to getting canceled.
No, not at all, dude. I mean, you're I don't know.
Yeah, we did make it though. It's 224, man. And you know what? I just want to say to everyone out there, like, there are some things that add stress to my life on the weekly, and there are some things that take stress off weekly. This always kind of takes stress off. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy doing this pod with you. It's kind of the best part of every week. And I'll be honest, when we've had to miss it, it's kind of felt like the missing part of kind of my week, my completion, and bringing it together and talking to all of you. We really appreciate the community. And by the way, buddy, there's a lot that happened like in the last 12 hours, because you and I were kind of like, well, do we do this? Do you take off? And then, like, I don't know, the whole freaking internet went down, which seems like something that, we need to jump on and talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about it. We got a great show for you. We're going to lead off with the CrowdStrike global meltdown. Microsoft applications were a part of that too. We're going to be talking about Meta pulling back on Gen AI in the EU and Brazil due to regulatory concerns. We're going to break down HP Imagine AI 2024 event. We're going to be talking about our favorite thing, which is chips, with TSMC coming out with earnings. They're really a bellwether for most of the industry. AMD had a Zen 5 Tech Day, and we're going to break that down. A lot of conversation about Apple potentially using YouTube to train its models. And Dan's going to hit that. And then I'm going to end the show talking about NVIDIA and Mistral coming together to create their own small model and NIM. So let's dive in here. I'm going to call my own number here. So unless you've been living under a rock, I mean, literally on X, literally 75% of all the content I saw this morning when I woke up at 6 a.m. Was about it being down. Now, what's interesting is it appears there's two independent things going on here. First of all, Microsoft had an apps outage. A lot less information on that, but a Microsoft executive did comment in the Wall Street Journal about it, in fact, being an issue. But the biggest of all issues is a CrowdStrike. So CrowdStrike is a broad-based security company, and one of the things they do is they secure devices. And one of those devices is PCs, Macs, and apparently what happened is a corrupted .sys file was automatically updated. And a .sys file, if you're unfamiliar with Windows, is basically the core elements or the most important part. It's about as low level as you can get and directly talks to the operating system. What this did is it created a bunch of blue screens of death, lovingly referred to as BSODs, and it has taken down major airlines, railways, hospitals, financial institutions, even news. Sky News was down, apparently, and I saw just a ton of flights that were canceled in India, in Europe, and in Asia. So yeah, this is a freaking meltdown. New information is coming out. But my first question is, how does an enterprise do a global update on a .sys file without doing an air gap test, right? And is that for deployment, speed? I had a couple people respond to me in X and said, listen, this is for 0 day where you have to be almost immediate, right? That's question number one. And the second question I have, because many of these systems are still online, modern enterprise Windows PCs have BIOS-based tools, right? Where through a management console, the IT teams can do updates as long as they have access to the BIOS. As long as the BIOS is not corrupted, they can go in and they can do updates to files on the fly. In fact, they can even reboot systems remotely. So knowing that these PCs aren't alive, it leads me to believe that A, they don't have this management capability in place, and it's likely they're using older PCs. We saw this with a lot of the 0 days where they were using, Windows 98, Windows 8, Windows 8, that did not have many of these software-based capabilities. And that's again, we're going to get more information as it comes out. But my overall message here is you always have to have an OSHBT plan when your first line of defense goes down. You need a way to very quickly find a way to go back to a known good state out there. And by the way, that's just not for PCs. That's for enterprise SaaS applications that get updated. Most enterprise SaaS applications platform have a major update that happens every month. Sometimes it happens every quarter when I look at the enterprise SaaS players, but you need a way to get back to a known good state, whether it's a PC, a server, a router, whatever. And, it's interesting, Dan, it really puts these companies like Cohesity, as an example, into play that have air-gapped, and Commvault, who have these air-gapped capabilities of being able to get back to that known good state. We'll be following this as it moves forward. Dan, what are your quick takes?
Yeah, I mean, look, you and I would probably be the first to admit that we're not cybersecurity experts. We have people that we employ on our teams that really focus on this. This seems to be somewhere crossed over between the impact of CrowdStrike's massive deployment and the number of endpoints and systems that it secures on a global basis, and the extraordinary impact that can be had from a small mistake that could be made on the developer side. Someone that's pushing code out. And to your point, we are sort of always up against this immediacy of handling the threats. And again, for people that are kind of out there, in our community here that aren't really into security, the threat environment is so much more substantial than most people tend to understand. The number of threats, the speed of which threats are being created, and the risk that companies, enterprises have. We hear about how, companies, banks, healthcare systems, these data breaches, these are not companies that have unsophisticated and a lack of resources working on security. These are companies that targeted daily, every minute by nation states and bad actors. Now, ironically, the from what we understand, and again, it's early, the full news, the story will evolve, and we'll hear more about this, is that this wasn't something that it wasn't done by an attack. This wasn't someone breaching or breaking CrowdStrike's perimeter or shields or getting access to its device servers or some core application. This was a self-inflicted wound. So to your point, Pat, like when that happens, it is really fascinating to me, this kind of, remember the old triangle, was it like speed, quality, and price or whatever it is, pick any two?
Yeah, it's almost it's a product management thing, or at least that's the way I always looked at it.
Like, to the point of people who spoke to you, it's like, yeah, I get the point of speed over, sort of backup and double, but like, really, as you are developing these pushing these next updates and codes, you don't have an environment to test something in very quickly just to make sure it doesn't break anything. It seems to me like you're going to find out that there was some error made that did not follow protocol or chain of command that created this breakdown. And the breakdown was substantial. To your point, look at how many things it broke. Pat, it's incredible. I mean, it really is incredible that a mistake and losing access to all these endpoints, losing access to all these systems that one company can secure can literally take down industries. It can take down entire industries. I mean, literally planes are not going up in the air right now. People are not able to check in for their flights. They're not able to get access to their bank accounts and broadcast it. Companies like Sky aren't even able to broadcast the news right now. This is, and by the way, it's taking hours to bring it back up. And this also shows the complexity and the significance of our systems, that even after we know it's wrong and we work to push the fix, it's not just flipping a switch. You and I have lived our lives resetting. Everything that breaks, you just reboot it. In this case, a reboot is not enough. Pat, this is fascinating. We're going to keep following it. I think Will Townsend on your team,
Anshul Sag will be
Anshul,
the analysis
Will,
too.
and then on our side, Shira Rubinoff and Kristen McComber lead our security. I'm going to be looking for them to be posting some more in-depth as to what happened from a security side. And then, of course, our developer folks will talk about where developers potentially went wrong. Look for more notes out of our team over the next couple of days.
Good stuff. Good adders there, dude. Let's go to the next topic here. So regulation has been a big topic related to generative AI, how that data is captured, how that data is processed, and how that data is used here. And some countries have put what at least I consider some onerous halt or penalties so large you wouldn't want to take the risk to do that. And as a natural byproduct of that, you have corporations who decided, okay, let's not do this. So, Dan, what is going on with Meta in the EU and Brazil?
Look, I think this is the first of many, not the last of an issue. So, we talked about kind of the security and speed. We have another issue that's going on that's kind of, these two parallel paths of innovation and then privacy. So as we've seen in the past, as we've launched social products, data-driven products, advertising products, the EU in particular, but also other countries around the world, in this case Brazil, have been somewhat steadfast to create what they communicate as as policy to protect their citizens and constituents from technology that maybe goes too far, that takes too much data, doesn't clearly articulate how data is being used, potentially gives monopolistic powers to companies inside of certain regions, prioritizing products and services. Well, now we've got the same situation going on with AI. So as we know, the U.S. And a number of other countries, but specifically the U.S. is aggressively wanting to have the technology leadership position in AI on a global scale. The vast majority of the large language models are being developed here in the U.S. The implementation of AI into these services, whether it's Apple Intelligence, Meta's Meta AI, whether it's OpenAI, these things are all aggressively challenging things that have not yet been regulated or no policy has been defined around. For instance, we really don't have use rights policy defined yet around large language models and training. And we're going to talk more about that actually later when we talk about Apple. But the net of this is that basically Zuckerberg and Meta is saying, we're just not going to launch our multimodal models in these regions. And that's, by the way, the point. They're not saying we're not going to do anything. They're kind of saying we're not going to do the most cutting edge and make the most leading capabilities that we're developing available in these markets, because what we feel as a company, and this kind of, my paraphrase of Zuckerberg, is that we feel like we're basically walking into a minefield. That basically the EC, the European Commission on Competition, that tends to regulate and has a revolving door of fines and taxations on big tech companies. No actual intent to really stop them, just fine them as a fundraising activity, is going to basically wait for them to launch these things, and then they're going to try to throw the book at them. And so he's basically saying, look, we're not going to do it. And also in this case in Brazil, we're going to hold out. We're going to wait. We're going to deploy these in markets that are more innovation friendly, like here in the US. And we will grow that way. And we will continue to give what I would call degraded or less viable technology to the EU and to those markets in order to protect themselves from what could be massive fines. And in some cases, these fines that the EU regulators put on can be percentages up to 10 and more % of all turnover of these companies if they don't follow these rules. Now, that's never happened. It's never landed there. But in settlements, you're talking about Microsoft, Meta, Qualcomm, Google, Amazon have all seen multi-billions of dollars over the last 2 decades of fines out of the EC for basically pushing innovation that is seen as somehow anti-competitive or breaking the rules of privacy and data. So this is probably kind of a first of its kind, though, Pat, like of a company actually coming out and just saying, you know what, we're not even going to do it. Like in the past, it's kind of like they always do it, and then they wait and see what happens. And I think this is going to come down to a situation of what is the constituents, what do the people of the EU want in terms of not being behind on technology versus companies saying we don't want to take the risk. So it's a really interesting kind of inflection, and maybe the first of many where companies are going to say, we're just going to degrade the product and roll out less. And, if you're going to keep regulating us, we're just going to give less technology, and good luck building it there. Because as we know, nobody, Pat, is building this kind of technology in the EU.
Great breakdown there, Dan. This is classic kind of barbell type of stuff that we've seen historically, where there's one end who is moving really quickly, and I don't know if you want to call them decels or all regulation is not bad. You imagine if we had no regulation of our highways and our airplanes and stuff like that. But classic historically, right? Even when you're looking at electricity and the safety and the value that brings in, there were a ton of discussions about even AC versus DC. Thomas Edison was involved. I mean, a lot of historical things to look at here. And I think some decels might say the only people that should be doing this should be the government, right? Like nuclear weapons and the potential damage that they can cause. So here we are, but I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's going to give bureaucrats more things to think about, and obviously it's giving tech companies more things to think about. One thing on reputation is the EU is really getting a reputation that not only are they hindering innovation, and they have very high tax rates and don't really incent for innovation. Companies, if you start your startup, that's not where you want to put your house up, right? There's a lot of other.
And if you do, buddy, you don't stay. Meaning, like the biggest ones ultimately start there, and then they defect to somewhere where it's more favorable. I looked at some charts on this. I mean, there's nothing going on there. There's like no unicorn companies. Like it's a handful.
Yeah, and there was even discussion during the Figma meltdown with Adobe, where it's like, if you're a startup, do you even do anything for sale in the EU, right? Or what country do you go into? So, and then you've got UK Brexited out, and their CMA right, seems to be wanting to, I don't know, lead with even more regulation than the EC. So, anyways, this is natural. This is the discussion. I sit on the camp of, hey, let's accelerate. Increasing innovation has always had an effect on lowering prices and providing more things for society that are positive. Let's jump into our next topic. HP had an event in New York City called Imagine AI. Unfortunately, you and I were not able to attend.
We had our teams there, right?
Oh, we did. Anshul was there and got the full download. I knew he's got a write-up coming, but kind of wanted to break that down. Like, what were the news? So, first and foremost, HP brought out a new AI PC, Copilot Plus PC called OmniBook Ultra. Now, officially, I don't think it'd be called a Copilot Plus PC because it doesn't have the operating system support. The AMD Ryzen AI 300 series does not have an operating system. It will, likely at the end of this year. Some of the highlights here is AMD's new Ryzen AI 300. It has 12 cores, interestingly enough, similar to Qualcomm's high end. Has 55 tops versus 45. So I don't know what exactly we're going to do with all those tops yet, but when it does get an operating system, potentially it could make Recall work better when that gets out, potentially faster image creation, potentially more accurate speech to text and translation, potentially faster RAG capabilities, which, by the way, kudos to HP for putting a built-in RAG capability. It currently has a 100 megabyte limit, which shouldn't be limiting for like Word docs and stuff like that, but very limiting for stuff like presentations and images on device, which is really cool. Battery life for this, right? 21 hours. That's compared to 26 hours from Qualcomm. HP also brought some stuff out for their workstation platform. One thing I've been really impressed with is HP's ability to create together not just a hardware platform with HP AI Studio for Z, but also its end-to-end workflow for developers. And what they did is they added, really leaned into a trust framework, security, and collaboration. So other developers working on Gen AI projects can collaborate with people, and not just on the local area network, but it also plugs into things like Microsoft GitHub. So the last thing I'm going to hit on here is they did roll out some collaborations with some pretty cool apps people. Beautiful.ai for presentations, Locus for data management and analysis, OmniBridge for integrating different AI tools, one called Polymer that's all about productivity, and one called Virtual Sapiens. I love that name, which gives coaching for communications. So pretty cool. Wish I could have been at the event, but we had that fully covered.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot there. Look, I think HP's following the path of being able to address a different set of markets. You know, one of the interesting pieces I read about HP, Imagine AI, was how the company's really focused on sort of AI for the persona. Meaning, you know, look, we've got this kind of inflection with AI devices where it's like, where's the value? You know, you and I have talked a lot about this. Like, we've got new devices. They're all Copilot Plus or they're AI PC, or you kind of name and define them. What are people doing with them? What are they using? What's the thing that's really important to them? You know, like, does everybody care about high tops? What about long battery life? That seems to obviously matter to some people. Which applications do they need to have access to? And one of the things I read was that HP is really focused on sort of hitting those different personas. They're focused on kind of saying, look, we've got expert types that are technical. They're going to need a certain high performant type of device. We have other people who are hybrid focused. It's going to be all about driving longer battery life. I think this kind of provides the platform to start the sell-in process, Pat, because the thing is like, what we want to really understand is how fast does this cycle move? How quickly do companies feel obliged to get in on these new next generation devices? And as they put these next generation devices, in play, are they able to get value that makes it worth the spend and what they're spending? So, Pat, I think that overall, my take is that HP is moving in the right direction. So it was a positive event for the company.
Yeah, I agree, and I am really enjoying my Omnibook.
Hey, hold on 1 second, Pat. Just get us started.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I need like 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm finishing the call. Thank you. All right, I'm ready again. Let's do this.
Yeah, it was your topic, so I didn't want to get into something that I don't.
Yeah, sorry, I had people at
here.
the door, people knocking at the door. They wanted to know if I was ready to go for a cruise.
That's great, man.
Magical ocean.
It's real life, dude. Hey, let's jump in here. TSMC bellwether for chips in the industry. Dan, what is going on? By the way, they do. If you're in Taiwan, you do two earnings, very similar to what they do in South Korea. But this was the real earnings, not the preview.
Yeah, they sort of give a kind of a preview. They gave it about a week and a half ago on the revenue. And then, of course, they came out all in. Look, I mean, Pat, would you have been surprised to find out that they beat their expectations and that they slightly raised their guidance and that they are telling the world that they're having a very hard time dealing with the outsized demand for AI? Any surprises for you there?
None, buddy. That's a not a shocker.
So, I mean, the first thing is that, their kind of preview on numbers looked positive. What did CC Wei have to, come out and really have to say here? Look, he said he's never basically seen demand like this. Their customers want to put AI in everything they're building right now. Of course, we saw the whole tech market sort of, fell a bit on its head the last couple of days. Former President Trump came out and talked about, some sort of tariff tax for the protection that the United States is giving to Taiwan. Look, it's kind of interesting because to me, it's a bit of a nothing burger. I mean, look, there is some real truth to what he's saying. Like, the U.S. is, the U.S. and the importance between the U.S. and Taiwan relationship does definitely create more of a pause for China, which has been doing drills in the South China Sea for how long, preparing itself for some sort of potential attack on Taiwan. Taiwan manufactures over 90% of the leading edge chips, which basically means that if there was some sort of change of control or power that was to take place in Taiwan, it could completely break the supply chain. It could disrupt all the innovation. And no matter how many great companies like NVIDIA and AMD are designing chips and Qualcomm here in the US, we would not be able to manufacture those chips. So I know this isn't the earnings conversation, but there is a tie together as to why these great results have not yielded a higher, tidal wave of growth in the stock price, because there are some concerns as to what policies might come into place. And as it's looking more and more probable that there could be a second term of Trump in office, he did kind of live his word. What he said he was going to do with China, he did it. And the question is now what he's saying about Taiwan. What does that mean? Now, I will put on the other side of this, Pat, that I do think that the outsized demand and the sort of insatiable demand for AI, if we ended up putting some sort of tax or tariff on exports out of Taiwan, it would just get absorbed. Like right now, like look at the margins and what people are paying. Like they could just charge more. I mean, I really do say that. I know I'm a bit cynical, and it's probably a little different on the handsets and PCs than it might be on like a data center server. But I do think most of the price would get absorbed. The problem is who actually ends up paying for it. And I think right now, what just a quick political thought on this is what Trump is basically saying is, I'm going to bring jobs back to the U.S. That's a commitment that he's made. And this is one of those things that has been completely offshored. He's saying, and by the way, the CHIPS Act was all about this already. This isn't some new thing that he's all of a sudden started. We wanted to bring more.
Well, Trump started what was the CHIPS Act. In fact, and this is public, I can talk about this. I did consulting for the DoD when Trump was in office the first time on all of this stuff.
Yeah. And so, as you know, you and I are kind of running through those the metrics. Though, is look, we need to bring. You know, I've said 20 to 30% of the leading edge out of Taiwan. It needs to move elsewhere, and ultimately, it would be pretty good if we got to parity. That doesn't necessarily mean Taiwan has to shrink. This doesn't have to be a lowest common. It can be a highest common denominator, where the chip space and the market for everything from high bandwidth memory, all the way to, you know, AI processors and XPUs. I think the rumor yesterday that Broadcom's going to make one for OpenAI. This scale means we need capacity. We need it in the US, we need it in Europe, we need it in Israel, we need it in other parts, maybe Japan and other parts of Asia. So anyways, long story coming all the way back around TSMC here. The demand is outsized. 50% now is at the leading 3 and 5 nanometer. They're considering moving some of their 5 nanometer capacity to 3 because so much of this AI silicon is being, you know, built on 3, and the demand for that is sold out for over 2 years now. CoWoS sold out for over 2 years now. Basically, any concern about this sort of chip AI thing, this infrastructure thing being a fad that's going away, isn't showing in any infrastructure commitment. So TSMC is indicating that NVIDIA should have a good quarter. You know, AMD, its numbers are going to be a little bit interesting based upon some of the concerns on order cancellations, which we'll probably have to come back and talk about at some point. But the AI infrastructure build out is real. When it becomes a consumption layer that's real and measurable and driving productivity, that ingestion period isn't, the ingestion period isn't fully understood. But this spend on infrastructure build out doesn't seem to be slowing, and TSMC's numbers were very indicative of that.
Yeah, the thing that really stood out for me is literally we're saying we are sold out for 2025, and I look at the specific words used. My takeaway is we could be sold out for 2026. This has to be a positive sign for Intel. Absolutely, 100%. Has to be a sign for them, and it's got to be a positive sign for Samsung and their foundry services business. There is just no possible way for us to not conclude that that's the case. You are going to have to work with Intel Foundry Services, and you're going to have to work with Samsung Foundry. You're going to have to spend the money to put that in there, and that could be tens of millions of dollars. There are design oddities that and flow changes you have to make in a design. You can't just do a copy and paste between founders. I wish it were that easy, but it's not. One great proof point for that is when you look at Cadence and Synopsys and their tools, right? They have to be specifically optimized for a certain foundry and a certain node and flow. Anyways, positive sign for
that's by the way really interesting. If I could say, just that you pointed that out. I mean, CC basically said no joint venture, which again, that could be just posturing, but maybe, I mean, I don't know if they need it. But two, Pat, that where does that excess demand go? Because even if TSMC goes all out on building more, it's years. So what I'm saying is the immediate demand, the Samsung and Intel opportunity you point out, is really, really substantial. So while I know a lot of people have been down on Intel, I mean, if they can just get it right, in terms of the outsized demand and take all that in, there's a huge growth opportunity for them on that side of the business.
Yeah, think of it takes 3 to 4 years from the decision and I am going to start building a foundry to pumping out wafers. Packaging takes less time, but if you want something like that, you're looking at at 3 to 4 years. That's the time frame. I think more like 3 years we see from TSMC. If it's a new city like Columbus, Ohio, with Intel, could take 4 years. Anyways, let's move to the next topic. Imagine this: more chips. AMD had its Zen 5 Tech Day, and they made some announcements that to me were expected. They were a drill down. So at Computex, AMD rolled out Zen 5. They talked about some parts like the Ryzen 9000 series and the Ryzen AI 300 series that would leverage it. And I just kind of want to go in that. So if you recall, my biggest question was, okay, 16% IPC improvement, and that's instructions per clock, right? So put frequency aside. For example, what architectural changes do you make to something to increase its single core instructions per second? And as you'd expect, they made some enhancements to the front end. They made some improvements to the execution units itself, which the purists would say this is the only way you can get to an IPC improvement. That's like increasing instructions per cycle up, going from 6 to 8, as an example. There were some back-end enhancements, and this is all about I/O, increasing the data bandwidth, stuff like that. Even improving your AVX implementation, and this time with 512 helps on vector performance, and some other things. Which it's interesting. I can debate whether these IPC or not, but optimizations made with 4 nanometer and even 3 nanometer processes also can play a role, particularly if you can improve. Now that'll improve performance. I'll debate on whether that's an IPC improvement, but it is a positive sign. So I'm gonna dive into this Ryzen AI 300 series again. This is the chip that the HP OmniBook Ultra is going to be using. And what's interesting is AMD says it has 50 tops, and that's the XDNA 2 architecture, but HP said it has 55 tops. I didn't have time to kind of figure out what the differences were, but it's something I'm going to do. One big announcement they made that was unrelated to the parts itself was the appointment of a new leader, which is Rahul Tiku. Now, I knew Rahul when I worked at AMD with him, and then he had a leadership role at Dell with PCs, but he is now the new senior vice president and general manager of the client business unit. And ironically, I had lunch with him yesterday here in Austin, and I think he's going to be an amazing addition to the leadership team at AMD. AMD was running so lean on the amount of people. And by the way, running lean is good, but sometimes running so lean that you're not getting stuff done and have the inability to get stuff done, that's the flip side of it. So again, mostly pricing reactions. There's always negative, like, oh, the price is too high with the Ryzen 9000, or cache latency. I love it when non-architects get into architecture discussions, those who have never actually been an architect. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to attend this one, so I don't have a ton to add, Pat. I think you hit a lot of the high notes. I mean, look, AMD's already working on Zen 7, so, this stuff moves very, very quickly. I do agree with your point on sort of new appointments, new leadership. Right now it's a really contentious, and our lab, our Signal 65 lab, at our second beautiful child that we've had together, has been busier than ever this year. Sort of doing the assessments, because we're kind of dealing right now with everything as it comes to these performance and efficiency claims, and these constant new launches and releases. It's what keeps the industry vibing and moving. So, I don't have much else to add to what you said, but I do think, the innovation pace continues to speed, and the ability for these companies to meet the performance and efficiency expectations is going to be critical. It looks like AMD is continuing to do what it does here, and I'm eager to sort of see how this stuff lands in the market. So I'm gonna keep that one short and sweet.
Sounds good. Let's move to Apple potentially using YouTube to train its models. Apple has what some would say is a pristine reputation for not stealing stuff and using it for themselves. Other might say Apple steals an incredible amount of stuff like IP, doesn't pay its vendors, like Qualcomm tries to make them go bankrupt. But this is an interesting one. Dan, break this down for us.
Yeah, they've only done that a couple of times, and never to anyone quite the size of Qualcomm. I mean, look, there was sort of this investigation that came out that was making claims that Apple intelligence had been trained on YouTube data. It was something like 170,000 videos is the number that's running around the internet. A lot of these are from these super influencer types, MKBHD, Mr. Beast, and it's about 100. I think it was 170,000 videos, and it focused on the subtitle was really what it was trained on. So it's the subtitles, which was the language. Now, long and short, Pat, is Apple doing this? Yes. Is Apple doing it for Apple Intelligence? And what they're saying is no. And this is really important because Apple launched what it called the Open ELM model, and that was a research contribution. So they were sort of starting to be involved in this LLM development and advancing open source. And so Apple calls that a state-of-the-art open language model. Now, when Apple talks about its Open ELM, they tell the markets that this was only done for research purposes. So this wasn't designed to power Apple Intelligence. So I guess the first question, Pat, is, and by the way, there's a group, and again, I'm not sure if you're super familiar with, it's called Eleuther AI. Now, Eleuther is basically a large collection that they also, that's kind of, I guess, has a sort of a nickname of the pile. And this is supposedly a pile of sort of real data. Now, one of the sub issues that's going to come out as we continue to proliferate the large language model and model development is going to be, we're going to run out of real human created data to train models on. So what's going to start to happen is we're going to start creating and training models on synthetic data or data that's already been created by AI. So what Eleuther, this pile has been created is to be a pile of real human created content and data that can be used for research and for the purpose of companies like Anthropic, Apple, NVIDIA, and others to train models on. That was a little bit of an audible from the play about Apple, but the long and the short of it is yes, Apple did train on YouTube. It took subtitles from 170,000 videos that were done by high profile influential voices on YouTube, but they used it to train a research focused open source model that is not being used to feed their Apple Intelligence platform. So does that make it okay? And I mean, I think the question mark there is that, I don't know that makes it okay. I don't know that all these companies that are using this content for free without any sort of royalty or sort of licensing agreement for the benefit of research makes it okay. But Pat, look, this is a fundamental issue that sits at the very top of the LLM development cycle. Where were all these models created, right? We all remember the very, very popular video of the OpenAI CTO talking about whether or not the Sora model was trained on YouTube, to which was probably one of the most awkward interview interactions that I've ever seen. When somebody's looking at you just lying straight to your face. But I guess you could call that a lie of omission. So long is that, Apple's not guilty, but they might not be guilty either. They're kind of following the protocol that everyone seems to, which is trying to find high value, real human created content to train models on, to then deploy into research ecosystems to try to create better models. But Pat, here's my caveat. Do we really know? Do we ever really know? I mean, they can say they're not using it in Apple Intelligence. How's the average person ever really know that that's true to be the case? And I think right now there's a lot of trust that goes on. And we found out whether it's been Apple, it's been Adobe, it's been OpenAI, it's been Microsoft, it's been Google. that there is a lot of gray area as to what data can be used, what should be used, and what we're seeing in the results that we're getting.
Listen, I think Apple is brilliant in how they responded to this, right? I mean, when in doubt, you blame it on your research group, you blame it on junior people, you blame it on somebody who put together a process that you fired. I mean, it's
Pat's about to go hard. I can feel it. I was.
No. I mean,
Was I too nice? Was I too nice?
No. You were actually, I think, quite balanced in that.
Weird.
And no, I still have PTSD from working in corporate America. I have seen every excuse. I've seen the blame game. I don't know if you've heard the two envelope joke about, the new CEO comes in and, one of them, talks about, hey, be sure to blame it on me if things go south. Right. I mean, we see responsibility here, but it is to be, fairer. Yeah. I mean, blaming on your research people. I don't think there are and should be any restrictions on research groups being able to come in and hoover data, as long as none of that gives value to something that ends up to be a commercial entity. And I have a hard time believing that what Apple's research group is doing and the insights they're gaining won't help Apple sell something they're going to make money and margin on. I mean, it's kind of like OpenAI is a nonprofit corporation that's worth $100 billion, right? I mean, it's kind of farcical and it's kind of funny, right? Anyways, I think we've drained this topic as much as we can.
Listen, man, I thought when you launched into that one though, that you were just going to come just crushing down on them. But basically, is the TLDR, if I wanted to give like the sound bite here, is that they're all equally as full of or not full of shit as the others. And when it comes to this, yeah, sorry, I just ruined this one. We're gonna get a censorship.
We're gonna get explicit. We're gonna be.
We hope that everybody out there will stay with us and realize that. I was just saying that in out of love for the industry, because I am a techno optimist, Pat. I like to think it's all good.
Oh, you're a D-cell. We know the real you. We know it. We know it. Hey, just kidding. Dan, we need to get you out to the golf course here, my friend. Let's go into the final topic. That is the NVIDIA announces Mistral NeMo 128B NIM. What is that gobbledygook, right? So first of all, Mistral is a model company. We all know what NVIDIA is, and they co-developed a 12 billion parameter NVIDIA inference microservice together. Well, that'll be out later, but you can get it on the AI service today. So essentially what they did is they came together, and this model was trained on the NVIDIA DGX Cloud AI platform, and it leveraged the NVIDIA Tensor RTLLM and the NVIDIA NeMo development platform to do this. So what does all this mean? Or actually, let me give you some of the deets here. You can run this model locally. This is targeted for enterprises. Okay, it's very small. You can even run it on classic, what would be considered NVIDIA accelerators for machine learning, not for large language models. So you can run this thing on an L40S. You can run this on a consumer RTX 4090, an RTX 45, even an RTX 4500. It is distributed via Hugging Face with an Apache 2.0. It's available now as a service from ai.nvidia.com, and the NIM is expected soon. So what can this model do, right? Or actually, what's the benefit of having a smaller model with higher accuracy? First of all, is you don't have to run something on a $30,000 card. You can run it more like on a $5,000 card. And What can you do with this? This is for chatbots, conversational agents, multilingual translations, code generation and summarization, and basically reasoning and world knowledge type of stuff. So this might be something you would want to use for customer service, or if you wanted to put a front end in human resources. So pretty cool. But by the way, it's FP8 as well, which means it takes less resources. And obviously, you want to dial. That's not as, let's say, accurate as FP16, but uses around half of the resources. Net, we talked about software being the real biggest moat that NVIDIA has. I'm convinced that somebody can create very competitive hardware. We've seen it from AMD, and I'm expecting that from Intel. But when you look at the entire solution and going from low-level drivers to libraries to machine learning frameworks to LLM models deployed over NIM, you have a very, very large moat.
Yeah, Pat, it's such a large moat, as I've had to talk to a number of media outlets about it, that their ability to out innovate the market by years is creating this vacuum of pressure. But I mean, is it really their fault for getting it right? I don't know. I mean, look, in the end, we need to be able to deploy models that can co-mingle public data and private data, and they need to be able to do so efficiently to create text and chat and generative content and assets. And the bottom line is that they've done it in a way that's more effective and efficient. And this is just one example of that. This is the way these complex, high technical debt enterprises that are full of data that want to be able to write software to a GPU to create an application to benefit from AI. This is the package, dude. This is what we've got here. So, look, the net is what you just said. I mean, look, they're doing a lot of things right. They're making it easy. They're making it accessible. And by the way, they're creating forces of stickiness that are going to outlast the innovation of competition. So that's it. That's my take. They're on a roll. Time to call it a day and get out to the golf course, buddy.
Yeah, hear the famine knocking. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We need to get out early so Dan can go golf and chill with the family. Dan, that is not a knock or a criticism. You work way too hard and you need to take a break. So with that said, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week. Hit us up on X, hit us up on LinkedIn. Give all the compliments to me and give all the criticism to Dan, and we'll call it a day. Have a great weekend. We really appreciate you. Take care.